What's going on, everybody? It's Justin Gazaba, and this is Living and Moving to Seattle, Washington. This is the channel that gives you all the nitty-gritty details of what it's like to live, work, eat, sleep, play right here in the Pacific Northwest, the Emerald City, Seattle, Washington, the beautiful Puget Sound. And in this video, we're going to talk about the top 10 surprising reasons not to move to Seattle, and generally the Pacific Northwest. You know, we could say Seattle, but it's going to be Puget Sound, really. Puget Sound greater area. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you're notified every time we drop a video. We're coming out with videos weekly. We want to put these together for you to make basically a relocation guide if you're deciding to move out this way, so that you know, boots on the ground, exactly what it's going to be like when you get here. You can reach out to me, shoot me a call, give me a text, sign up on the calendar, links down below. Put time on my calendar. We can meet face to face and brainstorm if you're making that move out here. We're helping people make the move all the time. So let's get into the video. Okay, so some of this stuff, I was super surprised as I've got my list because I want to stay on track and I don't want to miss anything. So I'm going to work this list. We're going to go down to it. I got 10 things right here. Let's talk about limited space. So Seattle, geographically, and I pronounce this incorrectly every time, but it's an isthmus. So what that means is that there's a peninsula, body of land. There's water on both sides, water in the middle, and then another peninsula that they connect. Now it's a man-made isthmus because they cut the Fremont cut. So, but that's really what that tells us, is we got two narrow, very narrow peninsulas meeting each other. And so there's water on one side and water on the other, and then there's these big lakes in the middle of the of what we see. So if you look at a map and you look at Lake Union, that's a big lake kind of just north of downtown. And then you go a little further north and you've got the Fremont Cut and Salmon Bay and the Portage Bay and all that stuff, and that links you out over from Lake Union over into Lake Washington to the east. And then north of that a little bit, you've got Green Lake and then Bitter Lake and Echo Lake. And there's a lot of water here. The Puget Sound, all these lakes. And what that does two things. It makes it hard to get around because you've got to go around these lakes, right? We've got those two floating bridges that go across Lake Washington to get you over into the east side to Bellevue to Kirkland. But it also means that there is not enough room to spread out and get sprawl. Like I think like LA, like instead of building up, LA just kept sprawling out and out because it was flat and easy. But we don't have that option here. So that puts a premium on the land, right? So the location has been the adage for real estate for eons. And it really does matter here what neighborhoods you're in, what your views are like, if you're going to get decent sunlight, or if you're going to be, it gets cloudy from October 31st all the way to October 31st all the way to July 5th. That's the running joke. We're filming this in the middle of January. We've had some beautiful blue sky days, so it's not, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But the fact is that because of the traffic situation, okay, that's one thing, but the limited land situation, our core, South Downtown, Pioneer Square, up through downtown Seattle into Belltown and South Lake Union, that's where we're going to have concrete and steel. Some of that density expands up the hill into Capitol Hill. But Seattle's bigger than that, right? We have all of Rainier Beach, Rainier Valley, Beacon Hill in the south, West Seattle and all that to the southwest. And then we've got Northwest Seattle, Magnolia, Ballard, Fremont, all over there. And then, we've got the Northeast Seattle, the Maple Leaf and Ravenna and all this stuff. So what we're seeing now is that there just isn't a lot of space. And so Seattle has changed some of their zoning, and we're starting to see more cottage style housing being built there. But the geographic constraints make it limited here insofar as how big Seattle can get. Number 9 on the list is going to be earthquake risk. Now, it's not California, but we are part of that ring of fire, and there are fault lines. And God, do you remember that New York Times article? Was it New York Times or the Journal? couple years ago, wrote this article about earthquakes. Came out and talked about how California, the big one was going to come, and California was just going to break off of America. There'd be tidal waves, awful things. And if you lived on one side of I-5, you were cool, but if you lived on the other side of I-5, you were screwed. That scared a lot of people. But there is, we have had earthquakes. I remember when I was 19, I worked at a lumber yard, and we had an earthquake come through. So that would have been, 19 would have been the year 2000, I guess. We had this earthquake come through. I might have been 20 or 21, somewhere around the early 2000s, 2000, 2001. I'd have to look it up. But you could see the hill, all the land was moving, lumber was shaking. It was wild. So there is that risk of earthquakes, right? I think about Australia. Everything in Australia is trying to kill you with snakes and spiders and all this. We don't have that kind of stuff here. Like, it's being outdoors. Black bears and bees is probably your greatest threats, right? Our climate's real temperate. Like, there's a lot of things going for us here in Seattle, but if you've got some kind of phobia for earthquakes, the West Coast is not for you. Number 8 on the list is gonna be the higher cost of healthcare. Generally speaking, across the United States, living in Seattle, we have some of the best hospitals and some of the best education hospitals with UW and these different cancer research centers. We have great hospitals, but it's not inexpensive. Healthcare is one of the higher costs in the area. So a lot of people are paying a more significant amount of money out of pocket to cover those expenses, even with their co-pays and everything else. A lot of times your insurance, just like your homeowner's insurance, it really does come down to where you live. A benefit, though, one of the good things kind of that counterbalances that is Seattle's a pretty healthy city. Organic food stores, people are all about that outdoor exercise and fitness. People ride their bikes and go running in the rain and stuff. So there's a lot of fitness that's happening here, and that's one of the more fit places as well. But we do have a higher cost of health insurance. Number 7 on the list is going to be the crowdedness. One of my big hopes and dreams, it'll never happen, but I wish it would happen, is that somebody on the board somewhere who makes, maybe the city council or something, would just say, hey, we need to make these sidewalks twice as wide as they are, because they're narrow and there's not, the buildings, there's a lot of zero lot line buildings, so the buildings will come right to the edge of the sidewalk, and then there's not enough room to pass people on these sidewalks. So Seattle, because of the economy here, because of Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon, Tableau, Salesforce, Disney, Expedia, the list goes on. You can look up Nintendo, right? All these different companies that are here. And because of the temperate climate and the mountains and all of its splendor and beauty, a lot of people are moving here. We just had some people move up from Texas the other day because of the way of life. The mountains drew them here, and they could make a go of it here. So, but that means that our infrastructure needs to support those people, and it's a little lagging. We're getting a great new ring road. That's for the light rail that's going to open up soon. That's going to be able to take people to the east side across I-90, which is going to be a tremendous benefit instead of just the north and south that we've had. It's going to really open things up for transportation. And that's great. We probably could have used that 10 years ago. And so it feels like living here, it always feels like we're 10 years behind on infrastructure of where we need to be. But if we could get that light rail up and we could get more, bigger sidewalks, even in, north of Ballard, north of 85th, there's barely sidewalks in that neighborhood. And technically it's considered the city of Seattle. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're way out somewhere else. But so it is, as things grow, and as we're building new homes that don't have garages or don't even have parking in some situations, you can kind of feel that Seattle is getting more and more dense, even in your Ballards and your neighborhoods, Ravenna and these areas, Maple Leaf, and these areas that used to feel more like a easy breezy open neighborhood. Number 6 on the list, we just talked about kind of how things are getting crowded, and that's going to be limited parking. I personally feel like Seattle is still a car dependent place, but that could just be my line of work, right? I got to run around and do stuff all the time. I do know some people that they live without having a car, being in Ballard or Capitol Hill, with good transit that runs, bus transit that makes that super easy on people. But as Seattle grows and things are under construction, one of the things that the city council had done is they said, hey, to get affordable housing so we can get more bodies inside houses, what we need to do is eliminate garages, because that space could be used for living space. And so all of a sudden, where you would have a 1,200 square foot house with a garage, now we have those things without garages, and it brings the price down a little bit because you pay a premium for that garage space. But what does that do? It kind of makes things tough as everybody's parking on the street. Number 5 on the list, let's get this right, oh my gosh guys, is higher taxes. Now, that sounds crazy to a lot of people because the city of Seattle, well, the state of Washington does not have an income tax, but we do have a 10% sales tax, and city by city it changes a little bit. So you have a 10% sales tax. So when you go buy groceries, or you go buy a computer, or you go buy anything in the economy, you got to add 10% to that. That tax can add up. The other thing that can add up is your property taxes, because those are the two things that Seattle, or state of Washington, really funds everything from. Your property taxes and your sales taxes. And so your property taxes, compared, a lot of people would compare it to like people in New Jersey complaining about their property taxes. Well, they're kind of in the same boat. They have, pretty high taxes. So do we. There's a higher cost associated with that. So you just have to kind of know, where you're coming from, what those differences are going to look like. Your property taxes you're going to have to reckon with, and your the sales tax I think is one of the highest in the nation. 10% sounds crazy to me, but that's the way it is. Number 4 on the list, you're going to notice a theme, because we're going to talk about traffic and congestion. So now we've got more people moving here because it's beautiful, and we've got a good economy here in Seattle. Seattle's economy has always been a little bit different than what the nation is, and always different than what the news reports, but we got good things going on here. But because of that, we see a lot of traffic and congestion. So I want to make sure I get this right. Really, the running joke is that anywhere in Seattle, you are an hour away from Seattle. So those, what do they call it? Rush hour is more like rush 4 hours. You really start to see from, 6:30, 7 o'clock, depending on where you're going, you can see, traffic all the way up into 10, 11, and then you've got the lunch break, and then all this stuff. So we really do see a tremendous amount of traffic. The good news is that if you're into hiking or skiing, or headed out into the mountains, if you get up and you hit the road at like 6:30 in the morning, you can break loose on most of that traffic. If you're trying to get an early start out to the trail. Especially on the weekends. Weekends is pretty easy to get around. But then again, you get into some of the neighborhoods and the side streets, and those arterials just aren't really built for the amount of people that we started to come here. And so we do see a lot of traffic. So I always look at Google. I check, Google will let you say arrival time, it'll give you a range. Usually that range is like 45 minutes to an hour and a half, because if somebody gets in an accident, Seattle started getting rid of the shoulder on the side of the road, so there's nowhere to pull off to, and it can really get congested. So just build in time, anytime that you're going to go someplace, drive around here, just make sure that you're taking a look at that, and then build in a little time for traffic, and then build in a little time to circle around and find parking. That's my personal preference. That's what I try to do. So, just give yourself a little grace, mercy, and forgiveness when you get out here, and just start to kind of understand that it does take some work to be able to do that. Number 3 on the list is the rain. Now, I think almost in every single one of my videos talking about Seattle, I have talked about the rain. And we have many different types of rain. We've got sprinkles and showers and a mist. We've got downpours. We've got sideways rain. We've got just wet fog where it doesn't even look like it's raining, but there's just, wetness. You just walk outside and you're automatically wet, even though there's nothing falling from the sky. It is just wet. And that's not even the worst part. Even when it rains, they'll count it as a rainy day if a cloud comes through and rains. But even today, like I said, it's sunny and we've seen, you know, some blue sky the last few days, and we're doing this mid-January. So, but that marine layer, because we're surrounded by water, it rolls in and it can be gray. A lot of people refer to it as the long gray. And it can just feel like from October 31st to July 5th that we are stuck in that season. January is usually pretty nice. February, the rains really start to come. We might get a bunch of snow in February. That's the time we get that. And then March, it teases. April teases. May is usually really nice. June, gloom. We usually get a January, right? And then July is hit and miss until mid-July, and then it usually tidies up. So it's not, I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be, but I've had people come visit, they've been out here and they've never seen the sun, you know, it was just cloudy the whole time. Number 2 on the list is the housing prices. So it's a different economy here. We've got a heavy tech sector, we've got Boeing, we've got great engineers, we've got companies that work to support those companies, you know, and because of that, because of the limited land that we talked about earlier, we're very restricted in where we can build. So you really can only go north or south, and then that traffic and the commute sucks. So people want to be closer, you know, under 45 minutes to the office because people are still going to work, right? So there's a lot of things to consider. You know, I've got folks that have moved out across the Puget Sound, across Elliott Bay and the Puget Sound over to Bremerton. And they take the ferry, and it's like, hey, they're going to jump on that ferry. It's about an hour ferry ride. They've got to get to the ferry. Probably takes them 15, 20 minutes to get to the ferry on their side. Then another 15 and 20 minutes to get to work. So they're all of a sudden they're into it an hour and a half, but they get a solid 45 minutes on that ferry to check emails, plan their day, and do that, and that works for them, right? So there is, you know, a higher cost of living than a lot of places. Haven't seen the reports lately, but at one point they were talking about how Seattle is more expensive than New York and more expensive than San Francisco. And I think that all the things tie together when you look at housing costs, you look at the taxes, you look at all that, how that's all set up, is that and the difference in pay, right? So maybe you might make a little bit more in San Francisco, but you might pay, you know, who knows how it's going to tease out. You've got to do that math for yourself when you're coming here and just expect it. Seattle is an interesting place because it's mostly hills and it's a long, skinny city with water on both sides, right? So that makes it a very unique place to live. And because it's all water and very skinny and, you know, and all these different elements, it does put a premium on these neighborhoods that you know, feel like they're close in, but feel a little bit further away from the city, like, you know, your Queen Anne's or your, you know, your North Capitol Hill, you know, some of these Madrona neighborhoods that we see a lot of premium pricing in. Leschi, what's the other one? Mount Baker. You know, we see some great houses there. Number one on the list, you could take all of the things that we just talked about and funnel them down, and that would bring you to just an overall higher cost of living. Higher medical, a little bit more expensive dirt, you know, and your house is a little bit more expensive. You know, I've heard car insurance is a little bit more expensive. So the cost of living in Seattle, we just talked about, you know, those reports saying it was more expensive than New York, more expensive than San Francisco. Obviously, what part of New York, what part of San Francisco is going to make a difference versus what part of Seattle. It's hard to compare apples, oranges, and bananas, and it just doesn't add up completely, because there are some places in Seattle that are reasonably affordable and easy to get around, right? So, but just in general, overall, when we put these videos together, we want to do a really good job for you when you come out and you're ready to move out here and you're doing your homework and you're looking this stuff up and you're trying to get a grip on, hey, what neighborhood, what school district, where, you know, where's my office for my hybrid commute, what's my commute going to look like, what things should I expect? And it would be remiss if I didn't mention, hey, it's a higher, you know, we do see these higher costs, but because our economy is so strong, because of the diversity in businesses and startups and the talent pool that we have, And the companies that we have here, you know, that's kind of what drives everything in that direction, is because it does become, it does pencil out to be affordable, right? So you just got to look at your math, see where you're at, what's gonna work for you. We're helping people make this move all the time. Like I said, we want to do a really good job for you. Reach out, shoot me a call, give me a text, whatever you got to do. Put time on my calendar, and then we can just brainstorm, you know, what's going on with you and your situation, and see if we can come up with a plan to help you. We do it all the time. We absolutely love it. So reach out to me, and we'll see you in the next video. All right, talk to you.